Hello, everyone. Have you ever experienced blocks when developing or using your intuition? I bet you have, because it's pretty universal. And today, that's what we're going to be talking about. I'm Nancy Scheel. I am a coach, instructor, and co-founder of Whole Medium Academy. I also have with me today a very special guest, Dr. Lynn Karjala. So as I welcome you, Dr. Karjala, let me tell everyone a little bit about you. You're a Harvard-educated author and psychologist specializing in the treatment of trauma in all of its forms. Through your 30-plus years of work in the field, you've empowered thousands of clients, book readers, and fellow clinicians through treatment and training, authorship, and psychoeducation. You're known for the model of the critical voice, which is what we're talking about today. And you use and teach both conventional and innovative treatment modalities, and you advocate the combination of the two as the best treatment approach. I also have to add that at Whole Medium Academy, we are so excited that you've joined our faculty. And of course, thank you for chatting with me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So one of the unique aspects of Whole Medium Academy's curriculum is that we do include this concept of the critical voice, which you pioneered. We've seen that when students understand it, their mediumship progress greatly accelerates. You've made this concept really accessible and incredibly useful. So could you explain what is the critical voice?
Yes. The critical voice is that negative, nagging voice that pretty much all of us have. Sometimes we hear actual words. Its favorite words are things like dumb, stupid, clumsy, and so on.
Oh.
Or sometimes we just experience it as a wash of negative feeling, especially shame or guilt.
Mm-hmm.
There are three really important things to know about the critical voice. One is that it's born out of trauma, including everyday trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The more unresolved trauma we're carrying, the more powerful the critical voice becomes, the more power we give it. A second is that we create it to be a protector. So it always has a positive purpose, no matter how judgmental it sounds. Another is that we create it in early childhood. So it thinks like a 4-year-old child. All of its characteristics, such as black and white thinking, overgeneralization, irrational reasoning, all stem from that.
That is so interesting, because if a medium is going to stay in the mediumship space, they have to turn off those internal cognitive habits or characteristics that you've mentioned. And mediums often call that interference the so-called conscious mind. So we could say that the critical voice is a specific aspect of the conscious mind, that negative, judgy, internal voice.
Yes.
Now, the critical voice can show up anywhere and everywhere in both life and work. Would you say that's right?
Indeed, it can. It shows up everywhere. In fact, there are very few, if any, places it doesn't show up. This is where problems such as procrastination, perfectionism, and even imposter syndrome come from. If you have ever put off an important task out of dread, or you've quit on a diet after one slip, you've been under the control of your critical voice.
Yes, you know, we've seen students instantly drop their mediumship connection when that internal self-criticism starts. Yeah. And we see imposter syndrome too, particularly with the more advanced students and the semi-professionals. Their critical voice causes them to constantly doubt that they really are good at this.
Yeah.
Somehow they believe they're just faking it, or that they'll be found out at any moment. And that's even though they do know on some level, of course, that's not true.
Yes.
So what else can you tell us about the critical voice?
So let's dive a little deeper. One characteristic of the critical voice is egocentrism. In psychology, egocentrism isn't the same thing as egotism. A young child sees themselves as the center of the universe and is unable to step out of that position to take someone else's point of view. This is literally true. If you and a young child are looking at an object from different angles, the child believes that what they see is what you see. They can't take into account that you're seeing it from a different perspective. But it's also figurative. The child believes that everyone else is thinking what they are thinking. So one consequence of egocentrism is that the critical voice believes it can read minds. If you're feeling doubtful about yourself, the critical voice will tell you that's what everybody else is thinking too. Another consequence of egocentrism is that we all take things too personally. If you are the center of the universe, then everything that happens is about you. Of course, the critical voice never credits you with good things that happen.
No.
But,
why?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an accident. If good things happen, that's accidental.
Right.
But if someone else is angry or upset, it must be about you. It must be about something that you did or said.
So when we're in class and we're practicing using our intuition or making mediumship connections, sometimes a student will actually start berating themselves, like even out loud. And so we'll stop and we'll use that as a teaching moment about the critical voice.
What's happened is that because they've judged their performance to be poor, even though it may very well not be, but they've judged their performance to be poor, the critical voice leads them to assume everyone else in the class is thinking exactly the same thing, that everyone is judging them as harshly as they are judging themselves.
This is so interesting. Tell us a little more. This is fascinating.
Let's look at another one of its features. As you know, the critical voice is unrelentingly negative. So another characteristic is that it catastrophizes. It always predicts the worst case scenario, the worst possible outcome.
Gosh, we hear this all the time. The student or the medium, they'll say, I'm getting ready to do a reading and I'm getting anxious and I'm thinking, oh my God, what if I can't connect to the spirit world at all? What if no one shows up to communicate? Crickets. So you're saying this feeling of panic, dread, or anxiety is caused by the critical voice.
Absolutely. Remember Murphy's Law? If anything can go wrong, it will, and at the worst possible moment. That is the critical voice through and through.
It's really astounding how many ways the critical voice can interfere with a medium or developing medium feeling confident and feeling solid, not just with their readings, but even in embracing their identity as a developing medium.
Yes.
Yeah. What else should we be aware of?
There are many interesting quirks to know about the critical voice, but let's talk about just one more for now. A third characteristic is that the critical voice has a rather strange view of time. It believes that all moments are present in the present moment. If you're remembering something painful from the past, it feels as if it's happening right now. And remember what we just said about catastrophizing.
Mhm.
If you're worried about something that may happen, the critical voice makes you feel as if it's already happened.
Okay. So developing mediums are often afraid that they're going to deeply disappoint the sitter and even spirit for that matter. Or worse, they're worried that they will actually cause the sitter harm.
Right. So even though that disappointment or harm hasn't actually happened, the medium hasn't even started the reading. The medium will feel as if that disappointment or harm is happening right now in the present moment. And then they react with shame or fear or self-criticism over something that hasn't happened.
It's such a terrible feeling. So let me take this one step further, because I've heard you say that any mistake we've ever made in our life can be brought back to mind, to life almost, by the critical voice, if the critical voice thinks that we're in a similar situation. So we'll be feeling that that mistake is happening again, and it's happening right now.
Right. So what's happening here is the critical voice keeps bringing difficult experiences back from the past, bringing back all of those awful feelings of shame and guilt and doubt, so that you feel them right now in the present moment, as if that difficult time was happening again right now.
Mm.
And even if you don't have a past mistake or a perceived failure to connect to,
Lucky you.
Yeah, who doesn't? The critical voice has another time trick. Anything dreadful that can be imagined in the future will also feel as if it's happening now. The critical voice imagines it as it might happen, then it changes it to it will happen, and then it changes it to it's happening right now. So, as you see, the critical voice pulls from both the past and the future to create disruption and disturbance in the present moment.
So, okay, wait a minute. We did say earlier that the critical voice is created to be a protector. Mm-hmm. So if I'm listening to this right now, I'm thinking, all right, it's causing all this disruption and difficulty. How on earth is that protective?
So how does this time warp serve to protect us? One way lies in the fact that disappointment is incredibly painful. Mm-hmm. So is screwing up in front of other people.
Yeah.
The critical voice would rather have you not even try than to try something and fail.
I recently coached a mediumship student who would freeze up and go blank whenever it was her turn to practice in class. And, you know, this is on Zoom, so she's seeing all the faces looking at her. And as we worked together in coaching, we discovered that she had a strong fear of disappointing other people. Mm-hmm. She believed they would be profoundly disappointed if she said the wrong thing or didn't have, quote unquote, all of the answers.
Right. One way to look at this is that her critical voice made a quick judgment call. If the student were to try the reading, she might disappoint others. That's a big risk.
Scary.
Yes. she can be protected from that particular risk by not doing the practice reading at all. So her critical voice stepped in, made her go blank, made her freeze, believing that this action would head off any risk of disappointing the other person.
Right, right. And when she and I worked and cleared this block about disappointing others, she no longer froze up in class. It was really
Right.
great. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, you and I could talk about the critical voice all day long. Obviously, we love the topic. But we wanted to give just a brief introduction to the critical voice and how it applies to learning mediumship. So for anyone who wants to learn more about the critical voice, and I recommend that you do, it just so happens that you, Dr. Karjala, have written a terrific book on it. So let me go ahead and show everybody what that is.
Thank you. Yes. The title of the book is Healing Everyday Traumas. So how does that connect to the critical voice? We all have a history of everyday traumas. These aren't the huge fire and destruction kinds. They're things like being bullied or being made fun of or being criticized. No one gets out of childhood unscathed. And that's especially true for people who are energetically sensitive. It turns out that the more of these kinds of traumas we have, the more powerful our critical voice becomes, the more power we give it to protect us. The book helps people recognize their critical voice and the problems that it creates. It also teaches you ways to resolve them and take your power back.
That's really what's key, is taking your power back. Now, you and I also offer a small group coaching program. Yeah. So it's a small group, as I said, up to 12 people, and we take everyone through a really effective process called Clear, Create, and Transform to release blocks and other impacts of this critical voice. You and I are both certified in this process. It's also called comprehensive energy psychology. And we've seen over and over how quickly and efficiently it can work.
Exactly right. You don't have to stay stuck in these negative beliefs about yourself and your abilities. I've been using this process with patients and other clients for over 20 years, fine-tuning it along the way.
So for anybody watching, see the video description below for more information. Check it out, see what you think. If you have questions, put them in the comments. Dr. Karjala and I will do our very best to answer them. And thank you, Dr. Karjala, for this conversation today.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be here.
If you've enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. More importantly, have a great day. We'll see you next time.